So, welcome to the final episode of Equity in Motion, the podcast. I'm Jasmine, and today we're shining a spotlight on social activism. Gender diversity and activism go hand in hand, but the challenges faced by women and gender diverse leaders are real, especially when fighting for equity and justice. Today's conversation is all about how these change makers confront systemic issues, navigate the political landscape, and inspire others to take action. So let's get into the heart of activism. And today we have two trailblazing leaders. And before we get started onto our questions, I would love it if both of you, Priscilla as well as Jaycee, could introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'll go first. Tansay Natsigasun, Bapibiu Squarewan Natsigasun, Utsiniya Treaty 8 Territory, Tall Cree First Nation. Hi, my name is Jaycee Meneen. I am a student advisor that works at the MacEwan University's Kiheo Indigenous Center. I like to introduce myself in Cree first before I introduce myself with my English name. So my English name is Jaycee Meneen. I am also a co-chair of WAVE. I was recently elected in November 2024. So really recent. But that's a little bit about who I am and where I'm from. My pronouns are she, they. I'm also that's it. I think that's it. I covered everything. I also work a lot in social activism around the city, but also in Toronto as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And Priscilla?
Hello, my name is Priscilla. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently based actually in Leicester, England, in the UK. So I'm here due to my legal education. So I'm a first-year law student at the University of Leicester here. I have a passion for social activism and I act locally when I'm back home in Calgary, Alberta. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology with a minor in Sociology. And during my time at the University of Alberta, I was fortunate to participate in various youth initiatives, student groups that were really focused on gender equality and also social activism as a whole. I'm one of the co-founders of Canada Confesses, which is a grassroots, now incorporated nonprofit organization, and our focus is on dispelling the myth that Canada is free from racism and other social issues. I've had a variety of experiences in youth-led movements and organizations, and I'm really excited to share my experiences, especially using a gender-focused lens and how we can continue the work that's really important, especially during this time.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here, and we'll just kind of learn more about your experiences /challenges /opportunities. So to start, can you both share what inspired you to pursue your role in social activism and what key experiences shaped your passion for this work? And maybe we can start with Priscilla and then go to Jaycee.
All right. So not to start with a cliche response, I've always been passionate about this work, but I would say it was really the transition from Nigeria to Canada that showed me the gap between the global north and the global south. So I immigrated to Canada at the age of 13. And I was really excited, I was happy to call this place home. And while that excitement came with lots of opportunities and the privilege, I realized that there are social inequities that existed here as well. And just seeing it from my perspective, and especially during the pandemic, it really highlighted how a lot of these social issues are often ignored. With the guys that, Canada is very multicultural and it's a safe place to be. And in comparison to the United States, we tend to come out a whole lot better, but that does not neglect the issues that arise. And I lived in a small town in Alberta for 5 to 6 years. That really shaped my perspective in social activism. And I was motivated to found Canada Confesses after just those kind of discourse that was existing, and I realized that we need to bring more awareness to these social issues. So I think that was probably the key event that sparked my motivation that I've always had to actually take action in tangible ways, and other events continue to motivate me to continue on to do this work.
Thank you for sharing. And Jaycee?
Yeah. So what got me really into social activism actually started also really young. I remember I grew up, being Indigenous and living on a reserve my entire life. And so a lot of people don't think that when you're a kid, you're really shaped by a lot of political issues, but your life really is. I can still remember a lot of days when we would have election years and how that would genuinely affect our reserve, our nation, and our people. And so I became really aware at a really young age. I remember Stephen Harper being elected and being really upset about it. And I remember following along with election terms because it would actually affect my life and how me and my family would communicate and just a lot of different things because it greatly shaped who we were as people. But I remember when I think I was in the 6th or 5th grade. It was one of those. But I participated in my first letter writing campaign, and it was just it was an intro. I think it was for not sociology, but that was way too young. Social studies. It was for social studies. It was like, hey, you know you guys can write letters when you're feeling upset about like towards your government or MLA, stuff like that. You can write out how you feel, and you can express your concerns, and I took that seriously. And so we went, and I would write letters, and that kind of started this path forward of, I can actually communicate with government. And then it started to turn more into a passion of, I can actually work in government. I can do all of these different changes without actually being an employee, but also regardless of age. And that's what really pushed me to go into social activism, because letter writing, lobbying, all of that fun stuff. Well, I say it's very fun. It's fun for me. But all of these pushes towards making your community feel safer is something that I'm deeply passionate about, because that's what made me feel safe and also made my community feel safe in those movements. And it's been nothing but, one, community building, but also two, just it's a great way of expressing how you feel, and then having that be communicated in government to make sure that the government is ensuring your rights and making sure yourself and other people around you feel safe as well. So that's something that started from a really young age, but literally like grade 5, grade 6, whichever grade that was, and then moving on up into these bigger roles that I just keep finding myself in. But I think it's not for a lack of trying, but it's more or less when you want to make changes, you just kind of find the right people that also want to make change, and they make that path a lot easier for you to follow. And I think that's been really helpful, and especially being an Indigenous woman, where we have already so many issues here in Canada and issues that are facing us in our communities. There are so many people along the way that are willing to help you get into these spots where you can voice your concerns and voice your opinions. And I think that's where WAVE, or the Women's Advisory Voice of Edmonton, really came in handy for me, because it not only paved the way for me to express my concerns directly to City Council, but also being a place where there's so many other allies. Burnout is so real, and we'll probably get on that a little bit later, but when you're having a group of women and that just understand you and what you're going through to a T and are willing to lift you up, it's such a great way, and a great way of allyship and support. So they definitely help push and support all of these movements and changes that we're hoping to do.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And I think like you were talking a little about burnout as well, and we can kind of get into that as well. I kind of want to also know about some of the maybe challenges and obstacles you might have faced. So I guess my next question to both of you is, social activism often comes with its own set of challenges. And were there any gender-specific hurdles that you faced in your activism journey, and how did you overcome them?
You know, being an Indigenous woman, there's not only just hurdles to being, a woman, but also being Indigenous. I didn't realize how prevalent it was, especially in politics, for some, like there's still a good amount of racism, especially when I'm in places like Toronto. Edmonton is actually, which is very surprising, a little bit more progressive, and well, actually, now that changes a bit, but at least provincially, but at least city government, we have Indigenous leaders that are part of that, which is amazing. And I think like Edmonton as a whole is really progressive, save for, provincial government, stuff like that. But being Indigenous, and I'm in these spaces in Toronto, there have been times where I've been met with slurs and a lot of really like, I don't want to say not nice, because it's just evil, right? It's just not great. A lot of different types of comments throughout the years, and that's been, it's a reminder of how much learning there still has to be, and how much work still needs to be done, especially for the general public. But that's definitely been a hurdle, like being a woman, there's been also hurdles, and there's issues of maybe, especially provincial government, it's being a woman and you're very passionate, and also being an Indigenous woman, there is this unfortunate label of being an angry Indigenous woman or angry Indigenous person, that both of those labels, they are used people because, one, it's a saying that you're not allowed to be angry and you're not allowed to be frustrated when your people are still living on the res short for reserve, and dying or going through a lot of different challenges. Like, our communities keep getting lesser and lesser by the day, and there's still no clean drinking water for a lot of communities. There's so many issues that we should rightfully be angry about and be outspoken about, but it comes at a cost of almost us losing that humanity side of us, where people start to see us less and less as people, and that also scares me a bit. So, and it's weird because you can kind of hear it in my voice where I've almost had to shift the way I speak, where I'm really passionate about these subjects, but in order for my points to come across, I almost have to gentrify or assimilate the way I speak in order for all of these points to come across a lot more clearly. Because if I came out and could be rightfully angry, a lot of my points would get shut down and dismissed immediately because it's coming from emotion. And that took a lot of different training. And that was just in realization, being in different political science classes, just the way people would respond to me and the way I spoke. And so it took a lot of different shifts that I shouldn't have had to do, to be so honest. And I wish I didn't have to. And it's unfortunate, but now that I see myself growing in these spheres of social activism and moving up and able to make these changes, and I'm realizing that a small part of it did come from how I share my opinions and how I express myself. And it almost came at a cost of watering down not even how I feel, but watering down who I am as a person in order for the cause to move forward. But I feel like community does a really big part in that, in playing that safety role, that advocacy role, and lifting up. And so that way I don't feel so bad about it, because I see all these movements working. It's not just from the sole cost of myself, but I definitely see it where I'm able to push things a little bit further if I just communicate a lot differently. And that's not fair. And it's totally not fair. It shouldn't be like that at all. Being a woman and then being an Indigenous woman, it's hard, and it's a lot of hard work. But honestly, for a lot of different community movements, it's almost like building up a relationship. So you're building up that relationship with yourself, and I kind of take it as a very Indigenous way of thinking, especially when it comes to relationality, where you have relationship with the earth, you have relationship, give and take relationships, I should say, like with people, with each other, with the land. I take that also with politics. So I have that relationship with trying to build more relationships with different politicians, and then also with parties and stuff like that, political parties, I should say. So it's that relationality and making sure that, even if we very, very much disagree, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done despite our disagreements. So it's pushing for that continuously. That's what I feel like that's my biggest setback, where I've had to change myself to a degree, and it's upsetting. It's truly upsetting, because I wish I still had, at least growing up, like a big part of that Indigenous accent that I grew up with, that me and my friends would always laugh about and talk, and it was great, and have that piece of community. But now getting older and being in these positions, and you almost have to corporatize yourself a bit. Like, it's so strange, it's so odd, because it's so far from where I am as a person. But I feel like that's where some of the biggest hurdles that I face, especially. So it's just coming from racism, how people perceive me, and then how do I adjust to that so I can get the goals that I want across, and the things that I want for my community and for a lot of different Canadians across in an effective way, so that no one's hurt. And it's such a weird thing to navigate, knowing where my people come from and my bloodline comes from. It's weird. It is really weird, but that's something I've noticed.
Yeah, thank you for your transparency on that, and even understanding the way that you communicate will sometimes impact the way that your message is delivered and how it's taken. And I think that's such an important point to consider. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
And Priscilla, do you have any insights on any of those challenges that you also had?
Yes, so I really echo what Jaycee has said, and it was said really beautifully. So it's very unfortunate that this continually happens. But yes, there's still also the angry Black woman sentiment that happens too as well, unfortunately. And that is one of the things that I feel I have to deal with. And we've sort of talked about that intersectionality. And Jaycee mentioned it's not just you're a woman, but also either you're an Indigenous woman, you're a Black woman. Those things do also shape how people treat you. And I believe there's this word called misogynoir, and it's exactly the layers of, being a Black woman and the type of racism that you experience as a result of that. But for me, the two things I wanted to highlight when I was thinking about this question was, first of all, something I've always felt. So, like, immigrating to Canada, and one of the identity that you're being given is, a visible minority. But I always thought it was ironic because I felt very invisible. So it was like, oh, I'm a visible minority who's invisible. It was just this dynamic that I had to grapple with. And I think a reason why is because I'm an introvert and also not neurodivergent. So as a result, I don't tend to stand out. I tend to like blend in almost like a spy in those kind of spaces. But I think that has led to some imposter syndrome, because when I'm in leadership spaces or in activism spaces, it's that question, oh, do I belong here? Like, am I, like, when you look at the crowd and you don't find enough of that representation, you can start to doubt yourself, which shouldn't be the case, because oftentimes I feel like we have to work twice as hard as everyone to even be in those spaces, and yet you have to continually justify your presence. Though I would say my experience as a whole has thankfully not been too negative, but I think that also comes with me being really selective with the kind of spaces that I join. So if I notice hints of microaggression or racism, I'm out, because I value my work and I will not be in that kind of space, even if it's very high priority. And then another thing is leadership. So I often joke that I don't pursue leadership opportunities. It somehow find me, because again, just that introvertedness, and I just like to be within my space. But because of how passionate I am about social activism and the issues that are very dire to my community, if a leadership opportunity comes, I suppose I just naturally go towards it. But I think being in that leadership as a Black woman has its own challenges. Again, thankfully, I haven't experienced this too much, because I think I'm able to just set the kind of environment for the team. So if by my leadership, I really emphasize we won't tolerate microaggressions, we won't tolerate these overt or subvert forms of racism and discrimination and sexism, it kind of builds a culture. However, people still have ingrained biases. And, when a woman like says something, like if I assign a task to someone and then a man does the same thing, it's like, as a woman you're treated, oh, that's kind of bossy, or, whereas a man would be seen as assertive. So just those kind of adjectives that are ascribed to people are things that you kind of have to deal with. Thankfully, I've just always had a not here approach. Like, I will do the work that needs to be done, and if the feedback is constructive, I will take it. However, you do know those sentiments exist, and people may see your leadership differently in this, and not like they would have if it was someone else. And I think it was just grappling with those factors. But again, thankfully, I think because of the opportunities that I choose, and also having to be the role model, for example, in Canada Confesses as a founder and director, you're also setting that sort of leadership style. But when I do find myself to just be in any other organization as a supporter, I often do my best to provide that feedback, and also to know when I think those sentiments, if there are women in leadership, I really try and support the work that they're doing and just emphasize, because the gaps that they have to face and the glass ceilings and all of that is way different. So just acknowledging that is super important. And yeah, I think those are my big insights and challenges that I faced doing this.
For sure. Thank you for sharing. And I found that it was really profound when you said, it's your choice. Like, you have to exit those spaces where you don't feel respected. And I think that is a very difficult thing to do sometimes, but I really admire that quality that you did say. I guess we'll start with you for the next question. So can you talk about a pivotal moment in your activism journey that significantly impacted your career and your approach to advocacy?
Great. This is a good question, because there have been various moments, but I think I will speak of a recent example. So I'm in law school right now, and thankfully, I was really surprised that, this institution would provide this, but one of the many things that we're taught is, what is law? Like, what is law actually? And also to look at law not just as a thing that exists, but as the thing that is continually doing something in society, when describing social norms, describing rules upon people. So I appreciate that the education is cognizant of this very real, this very real social issue. But really, what struck me was working with a volunteer, and I will not name her for privacy reasons. However, one of the things that she was dealing with is she was based in the Edmonton area, right? And she's a member of Canada Fesses, and one of the things that she told me, is the reason why she even joined the organization to begin with. And it was a continual battle with a very, very racist, Islamophobic, sexist neighbor, and she had to deal with this. That's why living her entire life in this place. She eventually had to move, sadly, from this place that she called home. But just this very real situation, and knowing that this is what brought her to organization, it just shifted me, because we were together, well, not fully together, because again, this is our own experience, but I tried to provide support when I could, while really just observing the entire process. This is 2024, 2025, this occurring, her having to go through this issue. She contacted other nonprofits, obviously the cops, other lawyers and whatnot, and her not finding that resource that she needed, eventually having to let go and concede of her right to this place that she had called home. It really just shows that even with all of the progress that we've had, there's still many gaps. And in order for us to acknowledge what the work that we've done, we also have to highlight that these issues are still happening. So for me, this was pivotal, because it shows that there's so much work that needs to be done, and also to just stop this veil that our neighborhoods are free from all of these issues, because they're not. So I really actually used her story when I'm thinking about the concept of what is law, because I realized that if I'm going to do this seriously and take this role seriously as a legal practitioner, we have to be really aware of how people are interacting rather with the law and all of their many identities and social issues, because it's not enough that, was it really just that technically her neighbor kind of got away with this and she had to move away? It wasn't. So really highlighting people's experiences, and I think I have that privilege of getting to know people in that way and hearing their stories and how touching it is, and realizing that I have to use my education, this privilege, in order to work towards change and work towards justice. That was my experience.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing. And Jaycee, what about you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree when Priscilla, when you talked about privilege and how much it shapes your voice, because even though I talked about the lack of privilege there is about being an Indigenous woman in activism spaces, being an Indigenous woman, there is some privilege in the sense that I have the right to say, my people, my family have lived here for years, and so I use that, my bloodline to say, these anti-immigration policies and all of these different works are not conducive or conductive to a really productive Canadian society. And so and that's something that I carry deep with me, and that's in a lot of the work that I do with a lot of social activism in Toronto, especially because I do some work with the Coalition Against Pinkwashing. I think that's where I looked at there was an opportunity, being an Indigenous person, to say, we don't stand for colonization efforts globally, we don't stand for colonization here in Canada as well. And there was so much privilege that came with that, being Canadian Indigenous person, that I didn't realize how far that carried my voice as far as it would, which was such an awesome experience. But another thing I think that was super pivotal in a lot of the work that I did, that really shaped how I view how quickly things can change in a positive way, and that actually started with the LGBTQ safe spaces strategy with the City of Edmonton. And so around last year, we actually, myself and my other co-chair, Echo Kaiser, so we actually met up with a lot of different people across Edmonton, and we essentially brought to City Council a proposal to create a safe strategy and also what is the word that I'm thinking? An action plan, and also an advisory committee for 2S LGBTQIA plus members up here in Edmonton. And so because that work needed to be done, there was a lot of hate crimes on the rise at the time, and they're still on the rise, but there was just some very scary incidents that we didn't want a I guess, a big push towards supporting violence against 2S LGBTQIA plus people. And that was something we had to make a stand for. I know previously that work came to City Council in 2018 and was shut down then. And so we just thought, let's just do it again. Like, let's just bring it back to council and see what happens. Let's do all this work and let's just see. And so it's that hope of let's see who comes, and we'll bring it to council. And I believe two members were there at the time, and it was Councillor Erin Paquette and then Councillor Jennifer Rice. And so they were both there, and they're listening, and they were like, Erin was just like awesome. So he was listening, he was very attentive about it, and we were bringing up our issues. But then slowly, as the issues started growing and the amount of people showed up to speak and say their piece, it was my first time being, and it wasn't on stage because we were all online at the time to do our pitches to City Council. So I remember I was just like this, where I can't say it, but I had my laptop in front of me. I was in my bedroom. I was just talking to this camera. I had my speech ready. It was my very first time presenting something to City Council, even though it was really small. But the numbers kept growing, and the more people came to show up, like the executive director of the Edmonton Two-Spirit Society, so that's Cheyenne Biko, and so she came to show up to talk as well. And there was the Firefly Institute. There were so many people that showed up to come and talk, just because of word of mouth, but also just community, that community building aspect. And that's what really opened my eyes to just even word of mouth, but that community building aspect to pushing larger issues to that bigger stage, and the movement and the progress that can happen because of that. As much as, you know, a lot of us would like to say like, oh, it was me. It wasn't. It was community, but community coming together to do that just because you have this idea. And me and Echo and Nadia as well, Nadia Boslama, who is just amazing, who did so much work for this as well, just coming together with this idea, like, let's just do it again. Like, let's just try it. And then all of these people showing up to come and talk was so amazing. And then I remember, because after we did our speeches, they took a little recess, and then we would all come back online and just kind of live stream the discussion that would happen afterwards. The mayor showed up. All of the Edmonton City Councilors showed up for this, like, very small meeting that was supposed to happen, this very small presentation, and everyone showed up. And in this live stream, we all started to talk about the different issues and why and we all agreed. They were like, yeah, why haven't we done this? Like, why? This is a big issue, and this is, like, we're clearly seeing that Edmontonians really care about this. And then I was like, of course we all care about this. And it was awesome. And that was such a great show of community and support by everyone, and a lot of different people from different communities all over Edmonton stepping up and then saying, this is what we want, and this is the change that we need to have today. Like, it needed to happen yesterday. And it was amazing. And I think that was a big moment in my career where I got to see, wow, community really supports community, but also community keeps each other safe. And I think that's the big two that can take away, especially with the Coalition Against Pinkwashing in Toronto, and then a lot of the work that they've done and that I've been able to partner up with. It's just been awesome, because not only was it community keeping each other safe, but it was also community supporting each other and uplifting each other in times of, like, crisis or in times of hardship. And that's the one thing that remains, because, like, the truth of it all is that a lot of governments and systems will all fade away, they'll crumble. And this is very political philosophy of me, I'm so sorry, but that was my degree. But I've seen a lot of systems shape and crumble and fall apart. But the one thing that stays the same and will consistently stay the same is community. And you can't take that away. And that's something I so greatly believe in. And I still believe in. When I was really young, my grandpa used to tell me the story about how one day when Earth broke up into 4 different parts of the world, part of the globe, and that one day we'd all come together and merge into one land called, and it'd be called the not just Turtle Island, but we'd be all part of members of a rainbow tribe, because we all have different skin colors, we all look different. But it was this idea that we were all going to find each other again, and, like, how do we support each other? How do we uplift each other? How do we make sure we all feel valid in our belief systems and things that we do? And how do we be a part of community? And that's how. And that coming together for different issues and standing up for each other. We see it continuously through the issues that are affecting us here at home. And that's something that you just can't take away. But that's what truly shaped how I viewed my social activism, is like, oh, there is an I in activism, but it's more or less a we. Like, we're all in this together. It's very High School Musical, and I love that. But it's great. That's what I love about the social activism. That's what changed that, is that, oh, I'm not alone in this. I have the people beside me, and I'll always have the people beside me, but I also have my ancestors that were behind me that pushed a lot of the different policies and did that work so I could be here, so I could be alive and live. And there's so much gratefulness to that. And when you carry yourself in that way, you just know this. You have so much love for the people around you and the community that is being built around you. It's really hard to dim that kind of fire and that momentum for a lot of the work you want to do. But that definitely shaped it a lot.
Thank you, and that seems like such an empowering experience as well. And you talking about community, that's like, it's nice to kind of think about it from being not just a you effort, but it's like a we effort. So I appreciate that perspective. I guess my next question, and I know you kind of spoke about this a little bit as well, but we know that resistance is a reality in activism. So have you ever encountered any backlash because of your gender or any other aspect of your identity? And if so, how did you handle it or learn from that experience? And we can start with maybe Priscilla.
Thank you. Yes, resistance, unfortunately, is commonplace. It's sort of the norm, but I don't see it actually. Like the way I reframe it is, if you're doing work that is notable, life-changing, impactful, you should expect resistance. If nobody is resistant, it's probably not the thing that needs to be changed. So seeing it from that perspective, I just naturally expect resistance if I know the work that I'm doing is very important, and not everyone is going to be happy with it, because of course not everyone will be happy with it, because that's how we've gotten here to begin with, and now we have to go forward. So thinking back about my experience, I would say not so much specifically gender, but again, just due to how the identity factors are intersected, there's no way for me to really say it was because I was just a young woman doing this, or if it was a different aspect of it. But one example would come from our Read, Watch, Learn workshop. So last year, Connecticut Fest hosted a series of workshops. And these workshops had various focuses. It was particularly three. So the first one, we really wanted to center Indigenous women voices and the issues that are continually faced, not just history, but also contemporary. The second workshop was focused on just activism in general and building momentum, and specifically international global activism. So while we focus on Canada and the issues that are here, there are a lot of issues going elsewhere, and specifically in Palestine. And I think this one, in just putting that workshop together, is one thing that we sort of encountered resistance, not just like within our team, but also like outside. I think mostly within our team, we're mostly on board, but we just wanted to ensure that we got this right, and we were representing different voices from it, and it was mostly our volunteers that felt really passionate about this, that even mobilized us to ensure that this got done. But obviously there's outside resistance, and especially since we tried to market and promote this, and I think we've all sort of heard what's going on around Meta around this time. So I think now it would be even worse now that they've disabled their hate crime commenting and all of that moderation system. Back then it was a little bit better, but there will still be comments that would be filtered through when we will promote the event workshop, like the ads on Facebook, Instagram, all the Meta owned platforms, and you would just get comments, pushback, like why is this a thing, and sort of all those reactionary type of things. And we had a good response because we expected that there was going to be resistance, and it was pretty simple. You block any hateful slurs, any of those kind of comments, instantly block anyone that were trying to be a bit constructive. We may engage with, but anything that would be hateful, that we did not want our community to be negatively impacted, was instantly blocked. And then obviously the workshop itself, because we're going to attract many people around this. And while the ads are specifically targeted towards Canada, we actually had quite a few people from like the UK and whatnot actually attend. And I think it just showed like the outcome was very positive. Like people really rallied together, they shared resources online, and we were glad that we did it, despite the fact I'm not gonna lie, we were kind of scared, because like what kind of resistance we have. We weren't incorporated to other times, so we're purely grassroots. And while our names are not publicly announced, you could find it. You could find anything on the internet. So there was that sort of fear. But because we know the work that we're doing was important, and resistance would naturally be a process of that, We just try to have safeguards in place for our volunteers because they are doing this, with their time and their talents. And then for our audience members too as well. So that included, it wasn't Zoom, so having good moderation policies, ensuring that we're able to get a good conversation going on, and but while still respecting, because people that are actually affected by this one way or the other are going to be at this event. So just really highlighting those kinds of voices. So I wouldn't say it was gender specific, it was just a whole array of issues at that moment. But one thing I've learned from this experience is just really reflecting on my values and my beliefs. And also, I think Jaycee's mentioned this a lot, community is really, really important. I don't think I would have done it my own. And in fact, it was really the community that led us to do this work, to begin with. Because we always knew, we wanted to do something to talk about what was going on. But it wasn't until we got comments from our volunteers, let's just do it. Let's just go ahead and do it. That really sort of okay, we are doing this. And then just know you feel safe in that community. It sort of feels like you have a shield against whatever negative pushback that you will get. So that was my biggest takeaway. And I'm still here. I haven't been harmed physically or psychologically. So I think it was a good experience, and it was for the better because we put something good in the world. And not to say our efforts alone, but just it was part of that communal effort. And sometimes that's what people need to see, right? There are other people speaking up about these issues, and it's not just them alone. So that was a really moving experience for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think that it was very insightful to kind of bring up the fact that if you're going to have a cause that's worth fighting for, that there's going to be resistance. So that's definitely a very big part of that. And Jaycee, what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I feel like a lot of the backlash that I faced has mostly been kind of through, and luckily it's not just me being attacked solely, but by media. Media has a lot of different, a lot of different narratives that they pull from, and it's really challenged the way I see a lot of different news networks and how they communicate different things. I do a lot of protests for Palestine, and that's a lot of the grassroots kind of stuff because, I'm very able-bodied and I can help with marshalling and a lot of different things like that. And it's just that's a cause I believe in because I don't like colonization. I don't think it should be happening globally, but that's a big cause that I deeply believe in. But that's where I face a lot of resistance just for having that belief system. A lot of people will immediately shut down because there's a lot of issues with funding. A lot of different companies will pull away, and that's really disheartening. And that's where I see a lot of movement happening and boycotting and doing a lot of these works effectively because money does talk a lot. And that's something I've learned in a lot of these fields is that money will talk, and that if you start controlling where your dollars go, that's how they'll listen. And a lot of different issues, for the sake of being very either one, secular, but also two, very neutral, you lose that humanity. Not that businesses have a lot of humanity because it's a business, it's not a person, but it's still a big issue where a lot of your core beliefs, we see where that spine is, we don't see a spine there at all. And so we want to see, where are you putting your dollars? Where are you putting these different numbers in? And that's something that I've definitely noticed as part of not just backlash, but to where our support for a lot of these causes are coming from. It's coming from the people, not coming from businesses at all, except for Ben and Jerry's sometimes. So that's great. But that's some of the different things that I've noticed, especially when it comes to backlash. But it's more or less happened to me face to face, of being on the ground in front of people when I'm marshalling. I've been spit on. Sometimes I'll wear moccasins to different protests, and people out on the other side will start to make fun of what I'm wearing, so my moccasins. And I think that's where I hear the most slurs I'll ever hear in the entire year before I start getting involved more in these on the ground kind of movements and being a protester, being a marshal, all that great stuff. I think maybe, and this isn't great. This isn't a great not timetable but comparison, but maybe once a year I'll hear a slur or something like that. Not that I'm used to. Well, you kind of, when you're a person of color, I don't know, there's just a weird reaction you get when you hear a slur. You're just kind of oh, okay. I don't know. When it happens so much, you're sure, whatever. And then you move on with your day. But this is the most where you hear it a lot, and you're just kind of tired about it. You're okay, cool. What's the next one? And that's how, like, when it first happened, I would definitely be a lot more effective. But now that I'm constantly hearing it, but I think, you know, when I'm constantly hearing it, I get not used to it. I shouldn't get used to it, but I think my coping skills have gotten a lot better because now I just smudge. So, you know, having smudge, having sage, sweetgrass, I like to think of words as being really sticky and they will stick to you. And so instead of having these really ugly, disgusting things stick to me, I just cleanse them off with a smudge. And then I feel so much better. I'm like, oh, that's just what I needed. Things are great. But that's where I felt a lot of backlash has just come from me being on the ground and people really disagreeing that I'm at a protest, that I'm protesting, that I'm Native, and I'm protesting against against colonization. So it's really strange, but it's almost like people look at me and they're like, why are you an Indigenous woman protesting for Palestine? And I'm like, because I don't like colonization. Duh. Like, of course I'm gonna be here. They're my brothers and sisters across the sea. Like, what do you mean? So it's that's something I've definitely faced. But when I think of my work for also 2S LGBTQ work, like just with that notice and that letter, there was a lot of fear from the community that was previous to me. And that's also something that if you're wanting to get into a lot of social activism, listen to the people that came before you. That is such a big help because they'll tell you their experiences and everything they've learned. That's like one of the biggest pieces, and that's what I've learned a lot from the Firefly Institute. And so there was a lot of valid concerns that were being raised, and concerns for safety, concerns with putting your public name out there, your full government name. So many of your private details can just be found by doing that and by speaking up. And so by them being concerned for the people, the younger folks that were coming up and getting into these spaces for the first time, they provided a lot of support there. That was amazing. And I see that with a lot of support that's happening too for Palestine. But it's listening to the people behind you because they'll provide a lot of that safety support. And I think also being with WAVE, it's been really awesome because we had the social media Parados, amazing team, but they would also filter comments, and that helped a lot, being someone that identifies as she, they, because I think we posted one video of me and I'm talking, I think I'm talking about, it was either Truth and Reconciliation Day, but it was, you know, on the little slide it said Jaycee, no, she, they. And then someone commented going, oh boy, here we go. Like just something like that. And it was so annoying. And, but Parados was awesome because they were monitoring all the comments and they're like, whoop, there it goes. It's just like, I saw it for a second, it's gone. It's good. I don't have to worry about it anymore. But looking into having, especially for a lot of social movements and activism, if you have a really awesome team of social media moderators, that's amazing because, again, you don't want to be seeing those stuff on the daily. Like, I don't use a lot of social media, only to, like, share what I know and share a lot of different supports and all that fun stuff on my stories. But that's about it, especially when it comes to social media. But yeah, I feel like that's where I face the most backlash is when I'm on the ground, I'm protesting. But surprisingly, it hasn't been so much from systems. So like government systems and stuff like that. But we'll see with the new Alberta government. This will be my first time like really about like facing a wall when it comes to change and a lot of policy changes. But I feel like with enough community support, you can push through a lot of different things and create a lot of different safeties for people around you. And so it's going to be a lot of hard work. There's going to be a lot of work ahead, but I'm happy to do the work. So if anyone is willing to do that work and just volunteer, and it doesn't have to be a lot of work either. I feel like the community is so large for a lot of these supports and movements that there's someone out there that will just do a little bit. And so it's enough to push a lot of things over the edge, which is great. So just, I think keeping an eye on media, keeping an eye on your government, keeping an eye on what's coming out every now and then it's really helpful, and especially in pushing a lot of these movements, and then just showing your support where you can and how you can.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that you kind of spoke about like monitoring that media, and that I'm sure that also helps with like things like burnout, right? Like if you consistently get that negative hate, like that can really tire you out. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, it can. Yeah, thank you.
I guess one of the last questions here is for both of you. If there was one advice that you had for a young change maker who's stepping in to try to like, you know, advocate and to use their voice, what would that be?
I would say, and this is very Indigenous of me because this is how I learned, but to just do it you literally throw yourself kind of like head first into something, and then you learn as you go. That's how I learned when I came to reconnecting with my culture, with ceremony, stuff like that. I had to kind of fight through the anxieties that I had, because it was a realization of, I don't want my anxieties and my fears to get in the way of something that I greatly believe in, because my anxiety is not worth more than a fight that I believe in. And so it's essentially putting people above yourself. But I think the biggest advice that I have, though, is to be very careful with especially with that reciprocal kind of relationship thinking, because that's totally, not that it's totally taken over my life, because I just assume that a lot of people come to you with like the best intentions. Sometimes they don't, surprisingly. And that's a given. That's a given for a lot of different people, a lot of different relationships. But listen to the people that came before you, and kind of get a read for yourself, how you feel, your comfort levels, how you're feeling, stuff like that. So really checking in with yourself when you're getting yourself involved with a lot of different things, but also try to keep your social media not exactly on lockdown, but just private it. Make sure you're seeing who's following you, who's reading, all of that fun stuff. And then look into a lot of different organizations around you that you believe in, that you want to get yourself kind of, situated with and partner up with and even support. Yeah, it can start really easy. It can start as simple as going to a protest and then making yourself known, because having a different person be there, having a body be there just to show your support for community is such a big help. As someone that, I go to the Truth and Reconciliation Day, when we have the marches for missing and murdered Indigenous women, we have these marches for Indigenous people. If you're not Indigenous, try to go, because being an Indigenous person and I see all of my people there, it's really nice. But when I see someone that's not Indigenous, I get so excited, because it's like, yeah, you see us too. Oh, this is so great. And that's genuinely how I feel. And yeah, it's just such a good way to show your support for community, and to be like, I'm here, I see you. And that's so healing. I don't think you realize, like, you just showing up is so healing for a lot of us, because having new faces is just such a relief, because we have someone continuing this fight and continuing these movements and this type of activism. And that's something that's you just can't take that away. You can't take away that feeling. It's so good. So literally just show up. That's it. Just show up, get yourself registered, get yourself nice and signed up for something, and just make yourself known. I think that's a great way. And it can be as easy as just showing up and just standing there. That's it. It's really nice. But yeah, that's one of the really great ways you can get yourself involved.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And I think showing up is the most important part. So yeah, I agree with you. Thank you. Priscilla?
Yes, that's an excellent advice. But adding on to that, I would say, and this is actually something I have on my sticky note posted. I took the sticky note with me all the way from Canada to here because of how important it is. And it says, you cannot do good if you're not doing well. This is not my quote. I actually learned this at it was a UNESCO for Youth thing, partnership that I believe the report will be coming soon, but it was about how youth engage in social activism and the challenges they face. And during that roundtable, one of the youth, I think, mentioned this: you cannot do good if you're not doing well. And that has stuck with me, because at that time, this was sometime last year, it just felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. And it was like, wait, hold up. I am just one person. I am 23-year-old. Why do I feel like I have lived 1,000 lifetimes? And it looks like other people were also feeling this way. And I think especially for women, since there's already that stereotype, that gender-based norm that, we are supposed to be caring and nurturing and all of that. I think that's what sort of leads even when women go into like social activism spaces, because there's already that expectation that you will care, you will absorb, and you will, just no boundaries essentially. So having those kind of boundaries that even while you're going to showcase empathy, and you're going to be passionate and care, and you're definitely going to show up, but make sure that you are well, because you cannot do the work as it is intended, and especially doing good work if you're not doing well. And the first thing I learned was when I started, especially going into community service, was you can actually do harm while it's trying to help. So it's not all that intention is going to create a good impact. So be aware for your intentions. And one way to take care of that perspective is just doing well. And obviously, I think the go-to for people is self-care. But as we've talked about, community care is very important. So like, yes, eat your meals and drink water, be hydrated and all of that. But also go to people, like Jaycee said, people who have done this work before you, your community members and whatnot, just to ensure that you're really feeding off each other, that energy that you will need, because it is a very challenging path. Like the road is very long, but we have to remember how we've gotten here is because of people who have sustained themselves enough to be able to create those changes. So it's just helping me to know that sustainability is key, and it's really transformed, honestly, I would go, my approach to activism, because oftentimes people go, oh, how are you so happy-go-lucky about all of these issues and stuff? And I feel like if you really do take care of yourselves and you're with other people, it really helps. Like you feel just more motivated to continue doing the work rather than burnt out. So it's really helped me overcome burnout, because if it's just too much for one day, I'm just going to take a nap instead of trying to dig in, which was like my mentality before, just continue to chip in. But now I actually know when to take a break and when to stop and come back the other day. And I think that has just improved, because I no longer feel like apathy or disdain. Like I actually want to continue to do the work. And if not for this quote, honestly, I don't know if you would even invite me to this talk, because I would have been like, I don't know what this is going to do. So I'm really glad to have learned this from someone else and also to incorporate it. So I pass it on to other people. It's just keep in mind, you cannot do good if you're not doing well. So be well first so you can do good.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think it's just the idea of if you can't sustain yourself, you can't sustain community. So thank you for sharing that. And what a powerful way to close our series. So today's conversation on social activism showed us the real change starts with passionate individuals who refuse to accept the status quo. And as we wrap up Equity in Motion, the podcast, we hope you feel inspired to engage in your own community and continue advocating for equity wherever that journey may lead you. So thank you for being a part of this experience, because equity isn't just a goal, it's a movement in constant motion. So thank you both of you for being here today.